Charles, we are back to our traditional format here in the studio, and we have an amazing guest today. We are joined by author Jean Shafiroff. Hello, Charles. How are you?
I'm great, and welcome, Jean.
Happy Mother's Day, Jean, and all the mothers out there.
Thank you, and I'm wishing all the mothers around the world a great day. And for women who have pets as children, well, I wish you a happy Mother's Day, too.
So, Jean, we're honored to have you on to discuss your book generally, and more specifically, your views on what may be going on with Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and the Gates Foundation. But why don't we start with your book and your background? Give our viewers a sense of why you wrote the book and what you were trying to accomplish in the field of philanthropy.
Yes, well, first you should know a little bit about my background. Presently, I serve on 7 charity boards, and I have been involved with philanthropy for quite some time. Now, I define the word philanthropist in my book to mean that anyone can be a philanthropist. Exactly what does that mean? Well, if you don't have the wealth to write a big check, you can become a philanthropist by giving your time, your knowledge, and then your available resources. So around the country and around the world, we have many, many philanthropists. And my idea is to encourage people. In my book, I encourage people to get involved in the philanthropic process. And then also it serves as a practical guide to giving. And I can go more into that if you'd like, or we can continue on the next thing. Well, first, a practical guide to giving. What does that mean? 99% of the charities out there are run well and they're good charities. But there is a very small percentage of charities that may not quite be handling the work they're supposed to be doing, or maybe their overhead is too high. So in my book, I discuss all of this. I discuss that a charity, if you're interested in getting involved with a charity, the first thing you ought to do is do research on that charity. How do you do research? Well, you could go to 3 websites, GuideStar, Charity Navigator, and the Better Business Bureau, and learn all you can about a particular charity. Smaller charities are not rated. Next, go to their website, see what they have to say about what they're doing. Third, read all the information you can on a charity. Read newspaper articles, all periodicals, anything you can read. Fourth, get to know the players. If you can get to know some of the board members and people who are volunteering, talk to them and see what they say about a charity. And I think from there, you can have a pretty good idea of where to go. If you really want to get involved, you can request the 990 form, which is a form that a charity is required to file with the U.S. government. A little bit about overhead of a charity. Generally speaking, the overhead of a charity should not be any more than 20% of all the revenue that's brought in a particular year. Now, when the charities get very, very large, that percentage decreases. So if a charity has a budget of $300 million, they may only have an overhead of maybe 8% or 6%. And the overhead, which is what they use for expenses, for salaries, for rent, etc., postage, the lower that number, usually the better. Now, charities that are involved in the arts, they often will have a higher overhead because they may have to put on a performance, and that costs a lot of money. I hope that was a little helpful.
It absolutely was. Another thing that I would echo your comments on is to point people to the websites of, for example, the California Registry of Charitable Trusts or the New York State Charity Bureau. Both are places where you can get, in addition to the 990s, you can get the Form 1023 if it's a public charity or a private foundation, or the 1024 if it's a 501c4. And you can get a lot of the organizational documents as well to make sure that the charity, in fact, exists.
Most charities will never put on a website that they are a registered 501c3 unless they are. I can't imagine putting out false information as a charity, but it does happen. And
Right.
right now, we're seeing many, many GoFundMe sites. And I caution people with that because that's not charity. That's an individual usually who's trying to make a little money. And if you know somebody and you want to give them a little money and they have a GoFundMe page, go right ahead and do it. But I would say be careful because there's a lot of fake GoFundMe pages.
Exactly. And another thing to be careful about is what type of charity it actually is. I'm sure that you're associated with public charities as well as private foundations. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the difference between a public charity, 170B1A6 charity, and a private foundation.
I serve on 7 charity boards: American Humane, New York City Mission Society, French Heritage Society, Southampton Hospital Association, Couture Council, which is, we run the museum at FIT, the honorary board of Southampton Animal Shelter, and then Global Strays. These are all public charities.
Right.
A foundation is a group. For example, I'm involved with New York Women's Foundation. Again, this is not a private foundation. This is a charity that calls itself a foundation because it gives out money to different charities. We oversee grants that we give to different groups that help with women's poverty and women's equality in the New York area. Wonderful charity. A private foundation is more, a family decides to put together a foundation to give out money. And I think that's enough for the purposes of this show to really say about the difference.
Well, in your experience, how common have you found it to be that a public charity would actually enrich board members or enrich donors or be used to create profit for the insiders of a public charity?
Every single board that I serve on requires that you sign a conflict of interest form. I receive no salary ever for any of the charity work that I do. I make no money anywhere. So when I sign a conflict of interest form, that specifically says that I am not engaged in any business that would profit me or a family member.
Right.
And so, in other words, if I say I was a partner in a law firm and a charity had to hire a law firm, well, if I'm on the board of that charity and I sign a conflict of interest, and almost every charity requires that its board members sign a conflict of interest form, my law firm could never do business where my law firm profits materially. Again, I don't have a law firm.
Right.
I don't have a business, but I would not be able to do business with that charity if I'm on the board when I sign a conflict of interest form. And as I said, all charities require conflict of interest forms. I've never heard of one that doesn't.
All right. So, and what about the auditor of each of these charities that you're involved with? And generally, I'm not really particularizing your experience, but in your general knowledge of charities, how common is it to have a large charity use a small auditing firm that is incompetent?
Very uncommon, because the larger the charity, the more likely that they will be watched by the government and other bodies. People don't want to give to bad charities, bottom line. So a large charity or a smaller charity, well, they want to get a good auditing firm. A charity has to be run like a business.
Absolutely. And then in the case of a private foundation, when a private foundation says it's making a grant to a public charity, but instead it makes it to a business, or it makes it to an individual, or it makes it to a charity that actually is a fraud, how big a problem is that for the donor?
Well, number one, it's a very big problem for the foundation. You cannot give money to an individual as a foundation, a private charitable foundation, or to a business. I've never heard of that. Right. To the donor, well, you've got to look into that. You shouldn't be accepting that.
Right. I asked the question because what Jason and I have been doing, my background is in investment banking. I retired in 2002, and then I got into the business of exposing fraud at General Electric. And then I focused on the Clinton Foundation, which I believe is the largest set of unprosecuted charity frauds out there. And with Bill Gates Foundation in the news, Bill and Melinda Gates' divorce, they give a lot of money away, obviously. It's a huge operation. But they've given over $150 million through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, characterizing those grants as grants to a public charity, which the Clinton Foundation is not. And they've done it over 100 times since 2001. We've done many, many shows on it. We've alerted the government authorities on it. And it's actually kind of sad to see the Gates. I mean, nobody wishes a divorce on anybody, and this is obviously a very tough thing they're going through. But to see their foundation, which does a lot of good work, get involved, mischaracterizing grants to the politically connected Clintons is not good. And we've also exposed, just so you're clear that we're not partisan, we've also exposed the American Conservative Union Foundation, which is another fraud, in my view, based on our work.
I can't comment on that. I will comment on all the good work that the Gates Foundation has done. It's the largest charitable foundation or private charitable foundation in the world. Since their inception in 1994, they've given away $54 billion. Now, they have an endowment, I just read, of about $49.8 billion, which means that they are preserving their continuity. The largest donor to the Gates Foundation is Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett has given about $27 billion to the Gates Foundation. Now, charities are not supposed to be political. And that I will say. But charities, from what I have seen, often have a political, people involved may have a political bias. However, that being said, they are not supposed to be political. Regarding the Gates, as far as I'm concerned, Bill Gates is the third richest person in the world. He's done a lot of good with his wealth. Melinda Gates has done a lot of good. They particularly focus on global development, global health, gender equality, and then the climate. And when you have someone like the Gates, Mr. Gates, Bill Gates, who's worth $140 billion, and actually they decided on getting involved in a big way while they were engaged together. And of course, it's very sad that they're divorcing. But from what I've read, they're going to continue as they've done with the foundation, continue forward, and life goes on, and the good work that they've done will continue. $54 billion is a lot of money to give away, and they will continue giving away. And in the year 2019, I think they gave away about $5.6 billion. This is very noble. Melinda Gates has pledged over the next 10 years to give $1 billion to women's causes, to improve women's equality issues. I think this is all very positive.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you make of the current status of the Gates Foundation? Do you think they'll work together on it going forward, or do you think they're going to go separate ways? What is your view?
The Gates Foundation has 1,600 employees. It is an institution. It's a business. It's not a business, but it is an institution. Personally, I doubt that they would break it up. They're doing well together, and I think they're going to continue on that route because it makes sense. However, anything in the world can happen at any time. We saw with the COVID-19 pandemic, who in a million years thought we would have a pandemic in the year 2020? Well, we did. So no one can predict the future, but we can comment. And I think from what I've read, I think there are no plans to break it up.
Mm-hmm. So going into a different area, here in New York, we have, in the city in particular, very high tax rates, only about to get much higher, city, state, federal, all concerned. And in the state and city, there are a lot of charities. And we saw, I personally am a fan of what Donald Trump was trying to do with the country, but I'm not a fan of what his family did with Trump University and with the Trump Foundation. And we saw recent years and months, we saw how aggressively the former Attorney General Schneiderman and then later Tish James go against relatively small charities. The Trump Foundation and Trump University were less than 25 million. But still, there are other charities, large charities here in New York, the Clinton Foundation being one of them, where people seem to be turning a blind eye to an operation that has never been validly audited, where hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars have disappeared, where there's been massive illegal private gain, and people just don't seem to care.
People need to care, but I can't really respond as to why certain charities are audited and why others are not. It's an unknown to me. My focus with my philanthropy has been to be positive and to empower people to believe in themselves so that they can go out and become volunteers and do good work. Mm-hmm. And it's not up to me to be the one who, I'm not a police, I don't police charities. So right. My intention through my book, Successful Philanthropy, How to Make a Life by What You Give, is to empower people to believe that they can go out there and make a difference in this world. The other thing I do is, besides serving on the 7 charity boards, and I've written this book, I host a TV show on local television which airs in East Hampton, Southampton, and New York City, and it's called Successful Philanthropy. And what do I do on this show? I interview philanthropic leaders and local leaders in the philanthropic community, talk about their philanthropy. I try to give them a platform so that I can be helpful to them. Of course, before I get someone on the show, I do research. Sure. And since it's pre-recorded, if someone says something that I think is really out of line, well, then I might just cut it.
Right. Of course. Yeah, it's very important. Another area I think that I have been involved in charities too, and another area that is very important to me is that when people give money to a charity that says it's doing something outside America, particularly in poor countries where there are lax controls, where there are issues in this country with corruption, but in certain poor countries there are big issues, like in Haiti. What has your experience been with finding charities that do good work internationally? Have you been able to come across a few that you like?
Well, there are many. And take, for example, the American Heart Association. Take the charity, the American Humane. And then my youngest daughter has a charity called Global Strays, which is a very small charity. She works as the volunteer president. She doesn't take a salary. She keeps her overhead low. She has a lawyer who's been working gratis for them. She does have to pay an accounting firm to do their books, but she sends money to Nicaragua, to animal rescue groups, Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Colombia. She is constantly on the telephone with them. She's taken privately funded trips to these countries to oversee what they do. She has people there on the ground. They have to give their P&L statements. And the donations on a relative basis are small, but the work that's being done to impact the improved lives of animals and then the people is quite enormous. When you take a country like Nicaragua, where the average salary per day is $1 per day, well, if you give that charity that's helping with improving the lives of animals by feeding them and maybe we support veterinarian clinics for workhorses and animals, well, it makes a big difference to these people. Mm-hmm. So do what you can. and you do the best you can. And they send videos of what they're doing, the horse clinics, so that we can see what's going on. And of course, right now it's more difficult to travel to certain countries because of the pandemic and because of political arrest at certain times. But, you know, we live in a world where we're in the United States. We just went through a pandemic where 38 million Americans were out of work about a year ago. Tremendous suffering, long lines at food pantries. People can't pay their rent. They can't pay their mortgages. It's been a really tough time. The world needs to come together, and those that have resources have an obligation to help. I believe I have an obligation to get help. I don't get a salary. I make no profit. I don't want a profit. I just want to get out there, encourage others to get involved in the process. And then also, I give away donations. I want to do what I can because our lives are short. And I believe we have a responsibility to serve. To those
Excuse me
that
one
have,
second, Jean. We're just having a little bit of interference. Stand by one second. I'm going to fix something here real quick. Apologize. There's always something happening that tries to disrupt the technical. But we should be good now. Charles, where else did we want to go with the conversation here?
Well, I think we want to thank Jean for her excellent writing and her hard work, and again, extend best wishes to you and your wider family on Mother's Day. I lost my mother a number of years ago, and mothers play a very important role, an essential role in life.
Absolutely.
And so it's important that we celebrate all mothers, not simply today, but my mother always used to say that Mother's Day is every day of the year.
That's true.
I like
And
that.
Jean, thank you so much for joining us. I want to remind our viewers that they can purchase your book, Successful Philanthropy, How to Make a Life by What You Give. People can get that at Amazon. I always like to get the books. You can get it on Kindle, hardcover, paperback, whatever your favorite format is. And thank you so much for joining us today, Jean. Have a great Mother's Day, and we'll see you back again soon.
And thank you very much for having me on the show.
Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Charles.
Bye.
There we go. Wonderful.
Very nice.
Okay.
You're free to go.
Yeah, I forgot to mention to Jean the method for how we... There we go. She got it.
Good. Now I can take these off?
Yes. I think she might have been taken a little bit by surprise, Charles, because we were coming at it from the angle of the Bill Gates Foundation seems to be, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation seems to be involved in some things that are maybe not visible on the surface.
Well, I think it's like going into, let's say, you have a guest on who's a tennis pro and ranked, let's just be charitable, 50th in the world. And which is not easy to be 50th in the world. And then you get up there and you say, are you aware that the all-time great female tennis player, Martina Navratilova, or pick a name, is a complete and utter fake? It's
They're just like, whoa.
It's like, what?
That just took a left turn.
Right. So there are people who have written books. No Such Thing as a Free Gift, I think, is a book that we've talked about in the past, which actually is sharply critical of the work of the Gates Foundation. And it's actually, I think, very well thought through. The argument being that much like Mansa Musa, who I don't know if you know who Mansa Musa is, but I never had the chance to meet him, in that he was an African king who died in like the 13 or 1400s. But he was one, if not the richest person to ever walk the face of the earth, he was one of them. And what he did is he went from what is now Western Africa with some of his gold. There you go. 1280 to 1337. He took so much gold with him on a trip to Mecca that he destabilized the entire global economy by bringing all this.
How did he carry it?
Slaves.
Wow.
And it's quite a story. I wish that historians would actually dive into this in a little bit more detail. For people who are looking for stories of greatness coming out of the African continent. This is really one of them. And the fact that this person was able to amass that type of fortune in that period, you've got to remember in the Middle Ages in Europe, it was, you're talking plague, you're talking pestilence, you're talking chaos.
The line at the bank alone was
right.
enough to send you away. I like this drawing.
But this fellow, this king, destabilized not obviously the whole African continent, but beyond that, the global economy by putting so much gold in all at once. Similarly, Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, by upping the quantity of giving the way they did, Lindsay McGooey in her book makes the point that they have actually destabilized the market for charitable giving. They have, in many of the countries where they operate, they send Westerners in who expect to be living in fancy apartments and villas and have fancy cars and security, and that pushes up the cost for the local population of living. There are a lot of unintended bad consequences of what they do, and that's to be expected. Her message in this book, and she's an academic, and she had a hard time with this book because to attack the Gates Foundation, if you're around the charitable world, I mean, you go on the list that we're probably on. And this whole idea here, at the time, they came up with this idea called philanthrocapitalism, which I call total bullshit. I mean, there's either philanthropy or there's capitalism.
Yeah.
It's for-profit or not-for-profit. You don't have the mixture of profit and not-for-profit. Is called public adornment, illegal private gain, charity fraud, probably money laundering. You don't want to have the two of them together. And
philanthrocapitalism just rolls off the tongue so much better than money laundering.
Or we call it philanthrocapitalism. But anyway, so I think my view, and for the audience at large, the new audience who may not know this, I have a number of close friends who are close friends of Bill Gates. And when I first got involved with this project, I thought, well, perhaps, I thought Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and the team around the Gates family would likely have the type of tough experts that who are going to make sure that the Gates family does not get drawn into misery by allowing this large entity to run roughshod over charity laws around the world. And so I had this hopeful view that and I think ill-advisedly hopeful view. And where's Gates's left hand, I wonder?
Yeah.
Anyway, I had this view that the two Gates, if they were going to make their final adventure together, an adventure as the world's largest philanthropy team, that they would really have hotshots in the foundation to just ask the tough questions and impose the tight controls that need to be imposed to make sure that this thing is run properly. And of course, we've documented in I don't know how many shows that that's not exactly what has happened here. And my view, knowing what I know today after having done with you how many shows, 300 plus shows, and having spent now 6 years on this project of looking into charities, is that Bill Gates, and maybe not Melinda, but Bill Gates was deeply cynical about everything to do with life. And he's a monopolist, and he built this gigantic thing. And the Clinton administration decided, you know what? We're going to antitrust your ass. We're going to go right after you, launch an antitrust suit. And Bill said, I think I better mend my image a little bit. That the whole thing about John D. Rockefeller handing out money to starving kids when he had his big Standard Oil Trust. Same idea. I think he said, well, you know what, this charity thing, it's actually a pretty sweet deal. My cost in my Microsoft stock is less than a penny a share. I give the stock away to the charity, and I get this gigantic tax deduction. I'm paying no taxes, state income taxes in the state of Washington. So I don't get that benefit, but I get a gigantic check from Uncle Sam, which isn't as much as I would get after tax if I sold it, but I'm still net in pocket to the tune of billions, right? If you give stock away that's, say, worth $10 billion, and you're at, to use a simple number, you're at a 40% incremental tax rate from the federal government, you give $10 billion of stock, you get $4 billion back from the government, a check in your pocket. And if that stock costs you less than $1, or costs you $1,000, that's a $4 billion check. It's not as good as selling $10 billion to pay the capital gains tax and keeping, let's say, 8. But still, it's $4 billion when before it was worth whatever.
But he did so much good work, Charles.
Exactly.
It's a good foundation. I don't want to talk about that foundation,
Right.
but I'm not going to say that directly.
Right. So,
Wait, let me take that back. I don't mean to be. I think our guest was taken by surprise, was not aware of our point of view on these things. But there was a little bit of a head in the sand kind of attitude to these things, to just immediately defend it.
well, I think when you run, I noticed that her book, as we were talking, the introduction was by one of Mike Bloomberg's kids,
Yes,
Georgina Bloomberg.
I saw that too.
And if you're running in that crowd, and you just the big boys, the Bloombergs, the Gateses, the people who've got foundations and are alive today with 10 billion plus and more, you don't want to. If your goal is to sell a book about charity and to appear on panels talking about charity, you can't really go straight up into the Bloomberg Foundation the way I have, because the Bloomberg Foundation, yes, Mike has actually done personally and through his foundation a lot of very good work, but he's smart enough. He's one of the smartest business people on the planet, if you look at his record, and he's smart enough to know that the Clinton Climate Initiative doesn't exist. And yet he has been very actively involved with that Clinton Climate Initiative, and he agreed to be the first chair of C40 Cities Project, another thing that doesn't exist, having that ice cream. But I don't mean, in the case of Mike Bloomberg, one of the things I really like about his work is a lot of his charitable work is anonymous. And I really think that is...
How do you know about it then?
Well, because people write about it, and he doesn't admit it and stuff. But I believe it is true that he gives a lot of money away. He gives money away in his name as well. But I think that is the hallmark of a true philanthropist, somebody who does not want people to even know. And you could be a crooked anonymous philanthropist too. But
You mean like by naming the
Everything.
Johns Hopkins School of Medicine after himself? Who would possibly know?
No, but honestly, he's done a lot of, here in New York City when he was mayor, for example, a lot of the projects that the city couldn't get financed or couldn't get done, he would just pay for out of his personal pocket. And he's, and no one is perfect. I make mistakes. You make mistakes. Jean probably makes mistakes.
Coming on this show maybe was our first.
No. She got some prominence for her book. But in the case of Gates, my view is that he probably had people study this. I mean, he hired somebody to design a strategy for what to do with his foundation. And,
How do you know?
How do I know? Bill Gates?
That he hired somebody. Maybe he just...
No, I know he did.
Oh.
because the person he hired, what you give somebody the benefit of the doubt until things like this happen, right? I'll tell you that I know that Bill Gates personally hired somebody he thought was the smartest person to do the job, to design a mission for his foundation, and he paid that person millions of dollars, I think more than $10 million. Wow. And of all the people in the world to pick, he picked somebody who later went to prison, Rajat Gupta, the head of McKinsey. And if you're sitting there, if you've fallen off a turnip truck, in your turnip farm, and you look over there, and instead of the bubbling crude, there's like a natural gas field that blows up your car or something.
Oh, is that the Beverly Hillbillies?
Yeah, exactly. If you fall off a turnip truck, and you end up with this gigantic fossil fuel operation on your ancestral farm, that's one thing. But Bill Gates did not fall off a turnip truck. People say he's one of the smartest people ever. He's been in business forever, and he did his foundation not at inception, but later in life. And he did it at a time where he could have hired anybody. He could have hired Boston Consulting Group. He could have hired Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist. You pick a genius. He could have hired anybody. Instead, he hires this crook, Rajat Gupta. And Rajat Gupta then gets the Gates Foundation centrally involved with Unitaid, with the Global Fund. Rajat hires Chelsea Clinton. Rajat gets involved with Bill Gates, with the Clinton Foundation, that something doesn't exist. How many strikes against somebody do you need before you say there's something really badly wrong with this picture, right? That if you truly wanted only to do good, you would not pick this guy, and you then wouldn't say, in addition to picking perhaps the worst possible consulting operation that you could pick. I mean, honestly, in hindsight, there's a book called The Firm, many books called The Firm, but there's one by Duff McDonald called The Firm, and it's about McKinsey and Company. And seldom do I actually go to a restaurant and start reading a book, but I was really interested in when I got this book, and I found myself laughing so hard in a public place that I noticed that people were looking at me, because this is a chronicle of how audaciously bad McKinsey was under Rajat Gupta's leadership. Literally every major project the guy took to was a disaster. He went to J.P. Morgan when they were a banking firm, and his genius solution was that they should get out of banking.
Oh.
There's what? A thought, like, okay, sure, let's do that.
Landscaping.
He went to Scandinavia and for McKinsey and ran the office there, and almost every single project he touched in Scandinavia led to a bankruptcy of one kind or another, industry after industry after. So the leadership said, well, let's make this guy, we don't need to fire him, let's make him the managing partner of McKinsey for 9 years. I mean, I just was reading, this was written back in 2014, after the Rajat Gupta scandal became known. But I would hasten to add that the full contours of the Rajat Gupta scandal have not yet been told. Like anything else, what I believe the swamp does is they when they finally get caught, they say, all right, well, we got to discipline them somewhere, but we don't want the full story of how political leaders, i.e. the Clinton administration in the 90s and the W. Bush administration in the early 2000s, how General Electric led the way for outsourcing, working with this idiot, Rajat Gupta, literally with him. They created this thing called GenPact, and when GE said it's okay to outsource all of your important data in a New Delhi-based startup company, suddenly corporations around the world said, well, if GE thinks it's okay, why don't we do it? And so all these valuable trade secrets went into India and leaked all over the place charitably. The full scale of insider trading, he was tagged, Rajat Gupta was, for mishandling inside information. I don't think we really understand yet the full degree to which people around his consulting operation and other consulting operations were trading on inside information, knowing that, let's say, a GE is going to outsource to a small Indian company, and you've got all these relatives and all these people with names that may or may not be actual relatives. It's so easy to, I would guess, this is a working theory, to trade on insider information in India. The Indian stock market is gigantic. And in addition, we know, and this is the reason I'm landing on Gates so hard here, we know that in addition to using the wrong consulting firm and having Rajat Gupta himself be on the board of senior advisor on the board of the Gates Foundation, of the Global Fund. He was chair of the Global Fund. Bill Gates gave him, I think, $20 million out of the Gates Foundation or thereabouts to Rajat Gupta, and it was for a public health foundation in India. And they thought it was, if you look into their books, I think it's in either 2005 or 6, in their private foundation forms, what you see is that the entity, the Gates Foundation, sent 12 or 20 or whatever the number was to Rajat Gupta at his office in Stamford, Connecticut. And why would you do that if it's supposed to go to India? I mean, wires work. You could, if you had a foundation over there in India, you just say, private banker, we're in the business of giving out, call it $500 million a month. This month, I want to send $20 million to Rajat Gupta's foundation in India. And the reason you might want to do that is because you would want to make sure that there is a foundation in India and that none of the money, India uses a different currency. Today, it's not a fully convertible currency.
What does that mean?
Well, a fully convertible currency, you have rupees. You
drop the top and go for a ride.
Well, you put the rupees, you leave India with, let's say, $1,000 in your mind worth of rupees that you forgot to change back into dollars because you were just rushing for a plane.
Certain countries won't take it?
Well, you leave India with those rupees and you can't convert them into anything.
You're saying if you bring Indian money to a bank in New York City, they'll say, get out of here?
They'll turn that can over and the laugh tape will start going.
They don't take it?
You can't. It's partially convertible.
Wow.
So, or it was. I think it is. There are limits on the convertibility, and so. And also with these currencies, I like India. I've been there many times. I've spent a lot of time there, actually. My last trip, I was there for 90 days in a row. Great time, even though I got sick. It really is, I highly recommend going there. But the problem with these countries and in the volatile markets we're in is that the exchange rate of rupees to the US dollar changes a lot. So if you send 20 million to Rajat Gupta at Stamford, Connecticut on April Fool's Day, to pick a day, and the currency gyrates all over the place, and he tells you at the end of the year that 20 million translated into, a billion rupees or whatever the math is, you don't really know necessarily that he was honest and translated the currency at the rate he claims. And if he didn't, and I'm not saying he did, but if he was dishonest with that money, you could wait until the dollar was really, really strong and translate it and say that you got, and get a whole bunch of rupees because the dollar is very strong, but tell the Gates that you actually translated it when the dollar was really, really weak against the rupee, and you steal the difference. And unless you have a good accountant going in and checking every bank account, every wire, all that kind of stuff, you're not really going to know.
And this is the type of thing I think that most people aren't thinking about, because this is like how to skim money off the top of some billions of dollars worth of transactions that nobody's ever going to be involved in. Charles, I think I misunderstood the email exchange going on when we invited that guest on, because I thought the book was about her discovering problems in the Gates Foundation.
I think she wrote a book about, she's written a book about how to do charity or philanthropy properly. And I was approached by her agent because she wanted to comment, I thought, about Gates Foundation and what's going on with the marriage and all that. And I think we seem to know more about that than she might know. So on the subject, though, of this Gates Foundation, and you had the picture there up of Epstein, I noticed various stories that were saying that it was Melinda Gates who got all, as the English say, cheesed off at Bill for meeting with Epstein in this strange mansion.
I wonder if it was Epstein that was the problem, or some of his friends that she didn't want him meeting with.
Well, these are, I've actually met 3 out of the 5 people there. This is Jess Staley. We won't get into why I know him, but he's a decent guy. Larry Summers, I loathe. He's a Treasury Secretary. He's the guy who asked me, what do I do? When he was president of Harvard, I was up there to benefit, and he was just being such an asshole about lording over to everybody that he's the president of Harvard. I just said, nothing. And he couldn't believe it. He just like, what are you doing here? But he's just very full of himself. And frankly, he took, under Clinton, he was Clinton's Treasury Secretary, final Treasury Secretary. I think he was a disaster as a Treasury Secretary. He was a disaster as president of Harvard. And he shows no judgment whatsoever, getting literally potentially in bed with Jeffrey Epstein. Note to the crowd, I don't understand men who wear these kind of slippers. You see the kind Epstein's wearing here?
He got those from Wilbur Ross.
Now, does he wear those too?
He does, like super fancy embroidered.
I just think that's no. And jeans, faded jeans. I'm surprised he isn't wearing those ripped jeans. Walking up to you today, I was walking down the street and I see this woman who's well dressed, except for the fact there are holes throughout all of her jeans. And I almost felt like, I don't give away money to people, but I almost said, look, you want me to just walk into the store over here and buy you some actual clothes? But anyway, and then Gates, it shows. So the Melinda Gates story was that she got pissed off at Bill for continuing to hang around with Epstein in 2013. They were in New York in, I think, February of 2013, Bill and Melinda, to accept some award having to do with charity. And she was over at the townhouse with Bill and just didn't like what she saw is what the reports are of how Bill was.
All the weird nude paintings and 15-year-old girls walking around massaging people.
Again, I don't have Bill Gates's problems. I mean, in money problems of having as much money as he does. But if you had that much money, you could be sure that there are a lot of people around you saying, "Look, Bill, there are many ways you can get in trouble here. You're smart and you're rich, but there are so many sharks out there trying to get you, and there are people who want to get you into seedy situations and take pictures of you. There are people who want to get you in compromising positions in a hotel room or at a party or on a plane. You have your own fleet of freaking private jets and probably helicopters, yachts, and this and that. He probably has a security detail. Why the people around him would ever let an honest Bill Gates, assuming he is honest, right? Yeah. Why would you would ever countenance spending a second with Jeffrey Epstein? And I'm here to tell you that when we go and we look at Man of the World, Joe Connison's book, I went back and checked because I saw this article suggesting that it was outrageous for Bill Gates to be palling around with Jeffrey Epstein in 2013. This book, Man of the World, is, I actually don't like Joe Connison's politics. I loathe the Clintons, but I have to say the book is very well written, and it's very useful to me because basically it's an incrimination document. I mean, it's got tons and tons of authoritative statements about the evidence that Joe has seen that basically documents massive charity fraud. And in this book, it states flat out that Jeffrey Epstein, quote, invested in the Clinton Global Initiative in the 2004-2005 timeframe. This is precisely when the Gates Foundation put $500,000 into the Clinton Global Initiative and another $500,000 into the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative in 2005. So and I know that's small beer in terms of amounts, but to be able, if you're Bill Gates, you're on the board of Microsoft, and there's this thing, the EU, and the EU is basically saying, look, the Clinton administration got its pound of flesh out of Microsoft in an antitrust action. We're going to do the same thing. And as Gates, that the Clintons are close to Tony Blair and close to other prominent politicians around the world and in the EU, and that maybe by playing along with Bill Gates, with Bill Clinton rather, Bill Gates can get some, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Chump Change. Maybe by throwing a few bones to Bill and to Tony Blair and others, you can make sure that this gigantic monopoly that has been in existence since whenever Microsoft was founded never gets called to account. So I think that given the state of play now, that we have the remaining journalistic operations in the world are seeing their budgets cut. If they're in the mainstream media, they're seeing advertising revenues plummet. They're seeing ratings plummet. So when you've got an elephant or a Godzilla in the room, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with massive amounts of money available to go after you if you make trouble for them, and also the ability to make sure that you don't get any grants or that people close to you get their grants cut off, maybe you don't really dive in and do what you need to do here. But there was an article in the last week or so by somebody suggesting that unlike doofus Joe Biden's idea that you should spend $80 billion to go after rich people in the IRS personally, this article said if you want to balance the budget and you want to streamline the United States economy and the advanced economies, what you do is you go right up into the grill. Specifically, this guy said of Harvard, which is a very large operation, and that Harvard, of course, is a charity and has the ability to pick winners and losers. When the Harvard academic faculty gets together and decides that if they have done this, that this type of treatment on COVID works and this type doesn't work, or this person is a legitimate investigator and this person over here is a conspiracy theorist, Harvard and the Ivy League universities and the other influence shapers have a tremendous ability now with the limited number of pipes that are out there through which the world gets its information to basically shape the whole narrative. And if on top of that, these are leaky buckets through which bribes are paid and enormous occurs, and the treasuries of not only the federal government but states and cities and other countries lose all kinds of money. You're missing the whole game plan here, I think, by not going after Bill Gates. And so, again, the divorce, I've been through a tough divorce with children, and I don't wish that, especially on a Mother's Day, on anybody, even on my worst enemies. That said, if you look at where we are now, we have the Gates Foundation, we have Bill and Melinda are currently at loggerheads. And as we think through what will happen to the Gates Foundation, I don't think it's true that Warren Buffett is the largest donor to the Gates Foundation. I think it's Bill Gates and Melinda Gates. But Buffett is certainly an important donor. And I think I could tell you, I know there are serious problems. There are what are called taxable expenditures. When you, as a private foundation, make donations that you characterize as going towards a public charity, and in fact they're going to, let's say, a 501c4, which is not tax deductible, or into a political action operation, or worse, to a person, that's a taxable expenditure, and you are under an obligation, once you find out that you've made a taxable expenditure, not only to make disclosures about it and to pay excise taxes, you have an affirmative obligation to try to get that money back. And I personally notified the Gates Foundation in writing, in detail, that they had been doing this back in 2017 or thereabouts. And of course,
what did they say?
Yeah, shut up, kid.
They didn't acknowledge it at all, right?
So I went to journalists, and we had stories published about it, and nothing has happened, because I think everybody is nervous about taking on one of the richest people in the world. And my view is, if you are so noble and such a philanthropist and trying to do good by the rest of the world, what you would do is you'd say, you know what? I made some mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm going to cure these mistakes. I'm going to change the way in which the Gates Foundation is controlled. It's not going to be a family fiefdom. It's going to have a real independent board. We're going to go back and redo all our filings. We're going to get the money back from the Clinton Foundation. Indeed, we're going to sue the Clinton Foundation and other foundations. And I can say that Bill Gates, in his personal life, has sued large companies that committed fraud. I mean, he is not shy about doing that. He should really do the right thing by his charities as well. And Warren Buffett, shame on him. I mean, it's not like once you become, unless I missed the latest developments, it's not like once you get a certain amount of money, you're above the law and you don't have to worry about anything. Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think
I'm wrong.
Yeah, about that, it seems like you can do whatever the hell you want.
Well, so I want to, if we're done on Gates, I would love to switch gears.
We got so many sound problems today, Charles. Hang on just one second.
Sure.
I'm not really sure.
Or a drink of water.
What is happening, but there's some clicking, there's all kinds of things. I've been thinking quite a lot lately about Warren Buffett and his contributions to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and how close he is to Patrick Byrne. It seems like all these guys are engaged in an operation where they want to, like we just saw right now, this woman doesn't want to say anything bad about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, doesn't even want to ask, where did you hear that? How do you know that? Just immediately on the defensive. I think that when you have money and influence, I mean, we see what happens when you go against these things that have money and influence. They sue you.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, here, when you're a charity whistleblower, and which I believe I am, and you validly, as I believe I've done, call attention to serious problems with evidence and now 300 plus videos, many articles, many appearances going back over 6 years, you're not supposed to, as the recipient on the receiving end of this conversation, if you're the charity in question, you're not supposed to start attacking me. You're supposed to listen and say, is the guy right or wrong? If I missed something, I will amend what I said. But to date, no charity, no target of any of these investigations has come to me and said, you're wrong, with a credible rebuttal of any of the evidence that I've put forward. So I would like to, Jason, if I could, spend a little time on a new set of revelations that I think is quite interesting, switching gears here. These are, Gates is definitely more of a Democrat than a Republican. Buffett is certainly more of a Democrat and a Hillary Clinton lover. We're now going to switch gears here and talk about the American Conservative Union, because I've got some new things to tell you.
Let me try one quick thing before we do that, because I hate this problem and I want to get rid of it.
Okay. I can't tell, but
Hopefully that, no, didn't do anything. Hang on. There will be a million suggestions flowing, but no one in the audience is going to have the solution to this. I'm talking to the people who create this equipment, who create the software, and they don't know. But where would you like to go with the next part of the show, Charles?
yeah, I'd like to talk now about the American Conservative Union, and I'd like to take us on a journey to the North Carolina charity search site, if possible.
Yes.
And I'd also like to look at the ProPublica site. So there we go. That one is perfect. American Conservative Union is what we're looking for. The button, yeah, American Conservative Union. And by the way, for those of you who are studying charities and want to learn more about whether a charity is in good shape or bad shape, I cannot say enough good things about this site. It is amazing, the information that they have here. And it's really become one of my go-to sites for sleuthing out a charity. So if you hit the American Conservative link there, if that's possible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just dealing with
No problem.
American Conservative Union right there.
Yeah. And then go down the page a little bit to document filings. And you look at, what is the filing in 2009 says what, Jason? Filing type.
Denied?
Yeah, what does the one for 2010 say?
Also denied.
Yeah, that's not a good thing typically when you're denied. So if you hit the blue link at the left for the first one, people who've been following this stuff carefully, and we hit the Form 990, will know that on ProPublica, and we'll demonstrate this in a second, on ProPublica, you cannot find the 2007 990 for the American Conservative Union. Jason, does this look like it could be the 990 for 2007 for the American Conservative Union? It says 990.
Tough to tell, Charles.
What does it say on the right? It's 2007. This is it, supposedly, right?
It might lead you to believe that.
Yeah, so if you go down the page a little bit, we'll go to the signature page. And we will notice, I'll ask you to tell us, Jason, whether it's signed or not. And you'll see in a second.
Just by the way you're describing it.
Right there. Oh, sorry, a little bit further down.
No, it's not.
All right, there's no officer signature, there's no tax preparer signature, there's no EIN number, there's no date, there's no nothing, right? But this was put in 2009. They put this in to North Carolina to see whether they could run this past North Carolina. Now, if you go here, look at this. I just was looking at this yesterday, and lo and behold, this is sent in on the 27th of February, 2009. You see that at the top there? This is the Schedule B for 2007. And for some reason, they say there's a C4. This is to the American Conservative Union. And if we look in this page, I believe could be 13 institutions. I forget if I have the exact number right. But look at this. Let's go slowly through this. Leonard Litwin is sadly still dead. But he's an amazing guy who lived to be 102.
Wow.
He was the largest donor, I looked him up, to Republican causes in New York State. And so personally, it seems he gave $10,000. PFA Voter Fund, I'm not sure what that is, $25,000. In 2007, I'm not sure Altria Corp was called Altria Corp.
Might have been R.J. Reynolds. Just one second, I'm trying to fix the sound again. It makes me nuts, all this clicking. I don't understand what's going on. No, you're not going to hear it, but people watching would be annoyed by it. has been resolved. So Altria, when did R.J. Reynolds change its name? Let's look that up.
Well, I would look up Altria, but I'm not sure that's R.J. Reynolds. I think that was Philip Morris.
Ah, right.
And maybe it had changed its name by 2007. Let's look that up, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
When did Altria? January 2003, Philip Morris changed its name to the Altria Group. I guess because that sounds altruistic.
I guess.
Everybody knew that Philip Morris was synonymous with killing you with cigarettes.
Yeah, and now the Herald Group, it turns out, I looked them up. Let's go very slowly here. The Herald Group is a communications public relations type firm, and I call bullshit on this. I don't think that group gave $55,000 on its own. I think a client of that group said...
Because they're too broke?
No, I think it's probably very profitable. I think a client said, listen, we'll give you an amount of money, and you turn around and put that money in as a contribution to the American Conservative Union. So I'd be checking that. On Verizon, I don't know about you, Jason. I think Verizon, it has a hell of a lot of trucks, but one of the things it definitely does have is an address.
Right.
And so I don't understand why they would fill this form in with no address, and also why they would only ask for $10,000. I don't understand. Here's ExxonMobil, $70,000. And one of the things I've noticed in here, it's a clue. I have a problem actually with punctuation. I don't believe I have a major problem with spelling. But I've noticed that the crooks around the American Conservative Union, there seem to be a number of them that have real difficulty with spelling. We'll see that in a second. So the Center for Individual Freedom, it turns out, is a very controversial operation, 10,000. Here we have you ever heard of, I've heard of the American Petroleum Institute, but have you ever heard of the American Petroleum Institute?
No. That's funny.
You know? And you see the amount here, 34,000.
I went to a party at the Petroleum Club one time, which was like a oil...
But that's 34,509. Texas Energy Future Capital Holdings, 100,000. This is actually, 9 West 57th is a building in which there are a lot of fancy people, but one of them is KKR, Kohlberg Kravis Roberts, which is one of the biggest private equity firms. And they bought, they had a deeply troubled utility that I think was this is perhaps the holding company that subsequently went bankrupt, something U. Flint Hills Resources, no clue what that is. We're gonna look up the Anschutz Foundation in a second, 5,000. I don't know who this Stephen and Camilla Brower Trust is, 5,000 for them. And here we have the Armstrong Foundation out of Fort Worth, 25,000. So yeah, there were 13 contributors listed here.
Unlucky for some.
Unlucky for the two we're going to show you. And they each said, this is something that was put in unsigned, sent across state lines to North Carolina. This information is obviously in the public domain because you're looking at it, and I found it in the public domain. Now what we're going to do is the standard simple check of looking at the Anschutz Foundation in 2007 and seeing if they gave, what does it say, $5,000 or $10,000 on the previous page there? $5,000. Did they give it to the American Conservative Union, Jason, or to the American Conservative Union Foundation, which is a very different thing? Here's the American Conservative Union saying this money went to the American Conservative Union. And they're saying this under penalties of perjury, and they're sending it across state lines into North Carolina, where there are some very important donors to the American Conservative Union and to the American Conservative Union Foundation, and some very important conservatives, including Jesse Helms, who has passed away, and Mark Meadows, who has not passed away. So let's go into ProPublica and look at the Anschutz Foundation in 2007 and see who they think they gave the money to.
What is it called again?
ProPublica Nonprofit Explorer.
Nonprofit Explorer.
We're going to do some nonprofit exploring.
Anschutz?
ANSCHUTZ. In the up ahead, yeah. AN.
Right here, right?
Yeah. SCHUTZ Foundation. There you go. First one.
There's many.
The first one. All right, now we go down. Look at how much information, folks, you can get online. I should have mentioned this when we were talking to Gene, that actually ProPublica, which is a left-leaning operation, does fantastic work. So let's look at 2007. It's further down. And pull this baby up. And I think you want to try to do it downloaded. Is this the 2007 one?
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, this is it, ending 11/30/2007. Yeah, and what we want to do we want to go to the detailed listing of grants. You see here, this is a gigantic operation. In this year, they had total revenue of $1 billion. Look at that. I mean, this is a seriously well-run, large operation.
Okay, sorry, it's doing something even different yet. Okay, $1 billion. Wow.
Yeah, that starts to be real money.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And you see this is received in all. You see that important stamp, October 17th, 2008. If the American Conservative Union were serious about providing a copy of what they had sent to the IRS, they would have sent a copy that's stamped received in Ogden in North Carolina, but they didn't do that. They sent an unsigned copy, and I think committed an act of deception by doing that across state lines in North Carolina. But let's go, it's a pretty far down the way, you'll find, into the list of donors. Unfortunately, because the American Conservative Union statement begins with A. It's going to take us a little while to get to where we need to go. Here's a Schedule B that shows that the Anschutz Company gave $443 million that year.
Wow.
I mean, but non-cash. They gave appreciated stock. Remember I told you?
What does this company do?
Phil Anschutz, I have met him. He is a member of the Lucky Gene Club, and his family owned a gigantic amount of land in Wyoming. And they discovered on it an even larger amount of oil and natural gas, and he built that thing up. And then he got into the communications business. He got the railroad business, and he's quite a major league investor and business tycoon. Started with a big base and made a big base gargantuan. It'll turn the right way in a second. This is just a lot of financial schedules, but slowly. This is. Can you turn that page around, possibly? All right, that's now let's just keep going. Now this is the people running it, and pretty soon you're going to get to the grants. Keep going. It's not that, or that. Yeah, not this, or that. Okay, slowly, Jason. Now turn this back around, please, and to the preceding
Boy
page.
Scouts of America.
Preceding page.
They're giving a lot of money to the Boy Scouts.
What does this say they gave to? Do they give it to the American Conservative Union?
Foundation. 5,000.
They believe they gave it to the American Conservative Union Foundation.
That's huge.
And this is 5,000. Now, if we see one other example of a similar mistake, I think we can safely say, particularly if we're talking about the period of time when Diana Carr Hubbard admittedly was embezzling money from the American Conservative Union, the American Conservative Union Foundation, and CPAC, we see this type of mistake is the classic mistake that you would use. You're supposed to have $5,000 of income in the American Conservative Union Foundation, and there should have been a Schedule B that showed that, the big donors. And if you don't have that, there's no 990 that I've been able to find yet for the American Conservative Union Foundation for 2007. Now, you could put that back together. They have refiled years later. The union and the foundation have filed amended filings for historically early periods. So you could reconstruct all this, but they haven't. So this is one example, Jason. Now let's look at the Armstrong Foundation out of Fort Worth, which supposedly gave $25,000 to the American Conservative Union. And let's look and see what they thought they were giving money to in 2007. So Armstrong, and there's several Armstrong foundations, but we want the one in Fort Worth. You have to hit, okay. Fort Worth, there it is. Okay, and let's go. This is a much smaller foundation, and let's go back to, I mean, most foundations are much smaller than Anschutz, but 2007. And let's slowly go through this and see how big it is. Because it's one thing if you're getting $443 million worth of stock in 1 year and you decide to give $5,000 to the American Conservative Union Foundation, it's a crumb, it's a pittance compared to the 443.
Yeah.
But slowly here, the total contributions, gifts, and grants paid in 2007 are $944,600. You see that right in that line. And so it'll be a much shorter exercise to look in the bowels of this PF and see how much money they think they gave by way of grants. And did they think they gave it to 501c4, the American Conservative Union, or nominally, schedule's coming, a 501c3, supposedly the American Conservative Union. And I think you're going to have to turn this sucker, around and again and again. Okay, here we see, Jason, in line 5, what do we see?
Foundation again.
Right. And they
25,000.
Right, and Ms. Heather Madden, whoever that is, $25,000, right? So they think they gave
Sent to Cameron Street.
and it's the correct address, but they think they gave in 2007 $25,000 to the foundation, whereas the American Conservative Union, a 501c4, claims under penalties of perjury that they got the money in the C4. So somebody's not telling the truth. And I go with the American Conservative Union and the fact that...
Well, these other two guys don't even necessarily know each other, and why would they lie about $5,000 if they have $1 billion?
Yeah, this is $25,000. And
Well, even
right.
so, I don't think it matters to these guys.
Well,
to lie about it.
Yeah, they would never lie about it. No, I think that the American Conservative Union Foundation is clearly lying about this. So let's go and do another little thought experiment that we couldn't do walking around. If we go into Google and we punch in Georgia and we punch in American Conservative Union and Secretary of State, we might get right to a landing page. I had sent it to you, Jason.
Is this it?
No. We may just have to go. Let's go into America. Let's go to Georgia Charity Search. And
This?
yeah, and let's punch in. We have to search for. We don't want to search for license. Click here, up here, to access the charity. Okay, we want business company name. Let's look American Conservative Union. Okay, and let's punch that.
The union or the
Yeah,
foundation?
union. All right. Let's see. Issued, expires. This is they only got a license in 2015, but prior to that, the history will show. If you go further down, I don't know if you can go further down. Well, no.
That's it.
I sent you another email to a search result, which shows that in an earlier period, they were involuntarily revoked. Both the Union and American Conservative Union Foundation had been involuntarily revoked in Georgia. Now, why is this important? Why is the fact that they were denied applications to conduct charitable work in North Carolina, and that they may have been denied and had their authority revoked in Georgia? It's important because the states that do care, and I asked our guest about Tish James and Eric Schneiderman, when they decide to make an issue, it's okay. When they decide to make an issue in New York or California of a charity not complying, they fine Donald Trump $25 million and then another whatever it was for the foundation, and say that the family has to engage in special programs and coursework to learn how to run a charity properly. They have to sign all these settlement agreements and stuff over a relatively small amount of money. These larger operations, New York, California, they ask you the question: has your license? Have you ever had your authority revoked? Whatever.
And would you lie about something like that?
Right.
No.
Right. So let's go into the NYS charity search.
This?
Yeah. And let's, just for fun, let's punch in first American Conservative Union Foundation. And search at the lower left. Yeah. Okay. This. Yeah.
It's very slow to respond, this site.
Yeah. We're really putting it through its paces. So if we look at the registration, if we look at the 2009 filing, I think that contains the transmittal letter at the end. Yeah. Is that all they have? Here's the financial report.
Oh, Maureen Otis.
Yeah, our friend Maureen Otis. Is that the only thing we have in there for her? Okay, let's look at the registration.
How do we get back to that?
Yeah, registration statement. Okay. Yeah, this is the longer one. Okay.
So down at the bottom? What are we looking for?
There's a letter from her. Well, let's look at the first page. Okay, here it says the organization's legal name, address. Their mailing address is to this law firm at...
So they had both 107 and 109 Cameron Street.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you go down the page a little bit, okay, they claim they were incorporated then on the 24th of February 1983, but they don't explain that their name when they were incorporated was the John M. Ashbrook Educational Foundation. They don't explain that at all. And here, has the organization, note, or any of its officers, directors, employees, or fundraisers been enjoined or otherwise prohibited by a government agency court from soliciting? They say no. The correct answer is
getting arrested
yes.
counts. Yeah.
Yes. Had its registration denied or revoked? They say no. Correct answer is yes. Been the subject of a proceeding regarding any solicitation or registration? They say no. The correct answer is yes. Entered into a voluntary agreement of compliance? They say no. The correct answer is yes. They do say they've applied for registration, but they don't say that all the applications are fraudulent. They claim that they've never been registered with any state or agency. Now, if that's a truthful statement, that in 2009, having operated since February 24th, 1983 in America, they had never been registered with any state or agency, that's a problem, right? That's a pretty serious problem. Solicited funds in any state, they say no. We're going to show you yes in a second, all right? Has the organization applied for IRS tax exempt status? Yes. If yet, yes. The date of the application is never, or the date of the termination letter is never.
Wow. So wait a minute. This is the type of thing that even if a computer is checking it, it should stop right here because you say yes, but you don't fill this in.
Right. But this is again in New York where you've got cover, right?
Wow.
For some reason. So then we say here, indicate all methods of solicitations. Only mail, not telephone, although they've hired a telemarketing firm. Not special events, not newspaper ads, not other, just by mail. Okay, so it's dangerous to use the mail for fundraising because especially if they've applied for discounted postage, which we don't know whether they've done that yet or not. But if you are not an organization that is in fact tax exempt and you go to the post office and you say,
federal crime.
And what was Diana Carr Hubbard went away for 1 count of mail fraud. 1. Now, when you are using the mails indirectly, because I think the way they did it is they had the American Conservative Union hire the fundraiser, use the postage, use all the mailings, and then have the money come in to the union. and then have the American Conservative Union Foundation overpay the union for foundation services, which is something we're going to get into in a bit. So here we have in New York, not in North Carolina, not far flung away, we have one example of false reporting just at the time when the organization is notifying the IRS, notifying the U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia that our head of administration has been embezzling money, and we don't know how much money, but we're referring this for criminal prosecution. We thought at the same time it might be a good idea to not tell anybody else about it and just fill these fraudulent forms out.
Status.
Why would we want to? We don't want to anger people by telling them.
Right. The truth.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah, it would upset you. This is better.
and so you stop here for a second. Fundraising expenses as a percentage of funds raised. They're not saying 90%. They're saying 0.9%.
That's
wrong.
Yeah.
Totally wrong. And they're doing this. This is David Keene putting his ex-wife in prison. Son's in prison.
What is this?
This
is ex-VP. How is that
He's executive VP. He temporarily was executive VP of operations. He's got his own problems.
Shouldn't that be EVP without dashes? This is like the former vice president. That's his
executive VP, yeah.
I usually see it EVP.
Right.
Ex-VP is looking for a job.
Right. You're supposed to put here, you see the problem here, they didn't have somebody who was willing to say he or she was the treasurer. And they didn't do an audit for 2009, just like the Clinton Foundation. We got a massive fraud we got to cover up in 2009 when we've got all these different operations that aren't registered. We're not going to hire an auditing firm because, that auditing firm could get in trouble. They'll figure out the fraud if they're good, and we don't want a crooked one, or maybe we do. But maybe what we'll just do is not even fill out a form, which is what they did. They chose to do. No audit for 2009, as far as I can tell.
This is David Keene's. Well, maybe this is somebody else writing and then he just signs it, but the pen looks the same. Forgive me, but that's girly handwriting right there.
Yeah, could be. Could be. So let's go and jump around a little bit. Let's look at the same thing let's look at the American Conservative Union in New York State. This is the foundation. Let's look at the union. Now, just so people understand, the foundation is you've got to take foundation out of the top. It is effectively controlled by the senior leadership of the union. So I would argue it's functionally equivalent. It's certainly an affiliate. You could argue it's basically a subsidiary, but you could try to make that argument. So here we have you see a lot of filings. Okay. Here we have, let's hit the 2007. Remember, we have the 2007 990 with a Schedule B from North Carolina.
Where they claim it's going one way or the other.
Right. And this is filed, don't go through this quickly here. This is a form for 2007. Look when it's filed. It's filed in April 11th, wow. 2012. Because we like to take our time and, we don't care about
aging in the cellar, and then they'll file it.
And notice who the email address is from.
Maureen Otis.
Right.
At Modus Law.
Right. Maureen at Modus Law.
Modus Lawn. You could change it too.
Where's my damn sandwich? Anyway, let's keep going, and we'll see the 990 that they file here.
This is like a different format, no? Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So here's that same 990. Let's see if it's signed. And we find out that it's not.
Where is the signature page?
You just right there.
It is.
So I would argue that by presenting this unsigned version, that act alone is fraud. Right, you're asked to give me my most recent 990, or give me a 990 for 2007. By April 11th, 2012, you had the ability, as the American Conservative Union, to to really do a 990 for 2007, and to actually have people sign under penalties of perjury here as the officer and as a preparer, if he's a firm, with the EINs and with the taxpayer numbers, you had the ability to do that. It's 2012 when you're sending this into New York. And you chose, it's like, fuck you, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to send it in this way and sign. And if I get in trouble, I'll blame it on a clerk. I'll blame it on, Corinne Brown or somebody,
Oh, Corinne Brown, they let her out.
Well, she won on appeal.
I think we should try to interview her.
We should, yeah.
That was a good thing.
So this is just to show you 2007. Let's go and look at the registration here.
Where's that? Back in the...
it's at the top above this. Registration statement for charitable organizations. Okay. And we go down...
Who's Denise?
Passero? I don't know. Now this is dated. This is you're registering in 2015. Okay? You've operated... this is your amended registration statement. Where's the original registration statement? But let's go down the page and see what they say. I think this is the one where they just say, we're exempt, we don't have to do anything. Yeah, they claim they're exempt, but they don't explain why.
I know somebody else who did that, even had an expert witness who was supposed to testify in court that never got around to doing that.
So let's go back into the index, and now let's look at 2009. And what do they have there? This is Keene signing this in 10. And I think if you go further down the page here, you might have some correspondence. Or we just have the 2009 990. We don't have, I don't think, in this one correspondence. So let's jump to the left coast, and let's go to the California Registry of Charitable Trusts, and we'll do the same sort of exercise. And down the page a little bit.
There's something that says, actually find the thing.
Right. Keep going. Boy.
You go to a raffle webinar. Charles.
Yeah, here we go. Registry verification search tool. American Conservative Union. Okay. And here they say they've withdrawn from California. But if you hit the...
Why would they do that?
Well, I think they're claiming that they don't have... Maybe they're above the law. There's a quirk in the law. They don't have to file anymore, and I think they're wrong. But this is what they've claimed. If you hit the union link... Okay, and we go down to there's founding documents. Or actually, before you do that, let's look at the RRF form, RRF-1 2009 form. Let's look at that. Okay, this is received January 3rd, 2011. Is Diana Hubbard Carr, I guess, has she been in prison at this point on January 3rd, 2011? Yes, she's in prison. She has... Oh, here they do report it correctly. During this reporting period, was there any theft, embezzlement, diversion, or misuse of the organization's charitable property or funds? And they say, yeah. Yeah, of course. And you're supposed to then explain it. See, if you answer yes to any of the questions below, you must attach a separate sheet providing an explanation for each yes response. Okay, here they say they became aware in May.
This is a hell of a detailed description, Charles.
Not terribly, but this is not detailed enough.
Well, it's not even 2 sentences, is it?
And this is filed in 2011 for 2009. Let's go back and look at 2008 and see when they filed that.
Where
the
is it?
RRF1 form for 2008. I see an IRS form here. Survey says, during this reporting period, this is filed January 25th, 2010. Second question, they claim no. So by January, whatever, 2010, they're saying they didn't know about a problem with Diana Carr in this point. Now, you have the PACER file somewhere, I think. Is that easy to pull up? Or is that a...
I don't know if I have it on here. Give me a second and I'll get
Sure.
that.
What we had, Jason has got these remarkable resources that allow him now the gremlins will probably frustrate us, but ordinarily allows him to pull up court records. And the summary of the court record is quite interesting. The summary and then what in the end when she pleads guilty and has to spend a year in prison, they tell you the timeline of when the organization supposedly became aware of all this. And that timeline does not seem to square with disclosures anywhere that I see.
It's
Problem?
well, I've got them somewhere, but I'm sort of looking for them now. So
It's okay.
Do you remember when I sent that to you?
Not the precise date. I want to say in April.
I think I found it. No. I have so many things on here from Pacer.
Well, we can get to it a different way, actually. If it's another way we could do it is just by Google searching the press release, the Department of Justice press release.
That would be faster.
That might be faster.
And what am I searching for?
Just American Conservative Union, Carr, guilty. And you probably will get... let's see if there's an actual DOJ. Huh.
That's funny. There was. But why?
Yeah. If you do Diana Carr, maybe. There we go. June 6th. Carr engaged in the fraud scheme from January 2006 through June 2009. There's press reporting that she was fired January 13th, 2010, i.e. before the filing was made in California that we just went through. In this Pacers, let's see, a copy of this press release. In the Pacer system, there's a fair amount of additional information that gets into the timeline, gets into what they discovered, and it gets into some specifics. But basically, what they tag her for is the period of time back to January 2006. And my suspicion is that this fraud way predates January 2006. It goes back perhaps as far as 1964.
They're in here, and I think the battery's dead.
That's okay. So going back then to California and to the results there, let's go back to the search function, and let's hit the American Conservative Union Foundation. Now, here's a very interesting thing I only recently discovered. You go down further, they have this. They tell you all the forms. You see the annual renewal data.
Yeah.
Let's look at this. So for 2010. The filing is received January 3rd, 2012. For 2011, i.e. late. In 11, it should be in 12. It's received March 12th, 2013. The one for 12 is received on March 3rd, 2015. And what this means is that donors in the period 2013 and 14 did not have the ability in California to understand the true state of the American Conservative Union because these people said, screw you, we're not going to file in California until late. They do the same thing for 13, they file it in 15. For 14, they file it in 15. And they try to be a little bit more current afterwards. Is this for the union or for the foundation, Jason?
This is for the foundation.
Okay, are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Let's see. Yeah, okay, let's go back and look at the same information on the foundation. I mean, on the union, rather.
You can see how confusing that is.
Yeah, well, it's by design, I think.
Right.
So here we look on the union, we find earlier information, right? And go down the page. Here, okay, the 2001 was filed on June 5th, 2003. 2002, they decided to wait basically a decade. You know, what we'll do is we were supposed to put this in 2003. Instead, we'll file it on May 23rd, 2011. Right? I mean, that's just like in your face. We're not going to do it. Fuck you. Right? And let's look for 2003. When did they decide to do that? Next one down. Also May 23rd, 2011. Same for 4, same for 5. So basically they just said by 2011.
Yeah, what happened that they were...
This is precisely in the period where the Clinton Foundation was probably quaking in its boots. Barack Obama needed to get reelected. Hillary Clinton was thinking about being president. The Clinton Foundation, as we've shown in literally hundreds of videos, had its books in a complete state of disarray. They did not have legal papers filed. They had not organized these subsidiaries properly. They had raised billions of dollars. They had spent hundreds of millions of dollars. They hadn't accounted for any of the related party transactions. Comes along this American Conservative Union, and American Conservative Union Foundation has the same sorts of problems.
Disarray, data array, these other arrays.
I don't like Ray. Ray's pizza gone. Anyway, all sorts of problems. And they're able now, this is Lois Lerner is in the hot seat, in charge of the tax-exempt organizations department, the IRS. She's got to have been aware of the problems at the American Conservative Union and the American Conservative Union Foundation because she and a team admitted later that they had been targeting conservative groups.
They have to be looking at it.
They had to have been looking at this. So the question is, why did Lois Lerner let the American Conservative Union and the American Conservative Union Foundation off? What was the reason for that? Could it have been that it suited the Democrats, the progressives, the Obamas, the Clintons, to have the American Conservative Union and the American Conservative Union in a state of disarray so that they could pull the legs out from underneath either organization at a crucial moment if the given conservative candidates didn't toe the line? And my suspicion is that that's exactly why they would have done this. And you look, another important thing here, Jason, it says online submission, yes, no. What do you see here? Yes or no?
Well, it says no, but...
And what about here?
Also no.
Okay, so how could you get this form from Washington, D.C. to California
Mail.
if you didn't? Right. So you used the mail, did you?
But even if it was online, it would be wire fraud.
I'm just saying, but using the mail again and fraud, I mean, these postal inspection people, the
Postal police?
Postal police, the guys,
I've spoken to them.
Have you? Okay, yeah. They decide that they don't really want to do much.
Well, they told me the circumstances under which they would do something, and I'm trying to bring those circumstances about, but I agree with you. They're not that proactive.
Right. But here you have an example of something that is admittedly wrong, so badly wrong. You see the scale of these things. They're taking in millions of dollars of revenue, and they're not getting audits. You're supposed to get an audit, and they said, we're not going to.
$8 million.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah. If you go into, let's look at the. I think it's the American Conservative Union. Which rank are we in here? Is this the union that we have here?
I don't even remember.
If you go to the top of this page, it'll tell you. This is the union. Okay, let's look at the filing for 2015, the 990 for 2015. $990.15.
It's going down. So it's just totally out of order.
Yeah. We can get it on ProPublica if they don't have it here. So they don't seem to have it in California.
So ProPublica?
Let's go to ProPublica where they do have it. And I think in ProPublica,
wait a minute. We want
Nonprofit Explorer,
American
Conservative Union. We're going to look at the foundation and we're going to look at the union for 2015.
Right. Here we go.
Okay. Let's look at the 990 for 15. Yeah, for 15. There you go. Okay. And okay. Now, just on the first page here, at the bottom, it shows that the total assets.
Wow, that's sloppy handwriting.
Yeah, to your right. Look at the total assets, net assets at the end of 2015 are negative.
By a lot.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, how do you
Where
operate?
does the money come from?
And if we go, what does this say? Revenue less expenses for the year was $55,000, right? Mm-hmm. See that in extreme right? They begin the year with net assets of $530,000, and they end the year with negative 734,671. But they claim that they boosted their net assets for the year by $55,000.
How could that
this,
be?
Cries out for an explanation. This is obviously
this is a lack
not,
of math.
This is not correct. Let's look at, this is the union for 2015. Let's look at the foundation for 2015 and see the same page.
Let's see, how do we get back to that?
Yeah, foundation 15. Yeah, this is what I wanted.
Okay.
Now, they start the year, and interestingly, look at this here. November 18th, it looks like that's
the
handwritten
18
over.
is overwritten.
Yeah. But
wow.
If you look...
Charles, there's like no aspect of these documents that is not screwed with.
Right. And
who would do that before it gets onto ProPublica? How do they get it to ProPublica?
I don't know. But let's look here. Here are they claiming the foundation started with negative
33.
33. I thought you'd like that. And then during the year, they're claiming the foundation made $716,000, and they end with $682. That math probably works, right? If you take $716,045 and subtract 33953. I think you do get 682092. That math worked, but for the union, it didn't work. Let's go into the balance sheet, which is a few down. Yeah, right there, past it. There, okay. So here you see, can you make that a little bigger? I mean, I can see it fine, but here you see total assets of $580,030 when they start at year end 14, and ending assets of $1,590,940.
It's a good year.
Yeah. So assets blew up by $1 million, and you see other liabilities, including federal income tax, payables to related third parties, and other liabilities not included, $561,485 at the beginning of the year, for total liabilities of $613,983. You see that?
Yeah.
And they begin the year with negative
33.
net worth. Now, generally, even
it's a bad position to be in.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, you can have negative net worth as a publicly traded company. It's possible to do that. But if you're a private enterprise with any kind of debt and you have negative net worth, you got to tell your creditors about that. I mean, that's very dangerous stuff. And it's certainly, I would argue that any charity that has negative net worth is trading recklessly. That the directors, long before they filed this report, they had 10 and a half months to file this report. Right? They could have scared up. There are a lot of rich people around the American Conservative Union. They could have scared up $33,000 somehow, or more than that. They should have been, as the Clinton Foundation did, illegally. They should have legally sought an endowment, which they once had actually, a small endowment, which is a story for another day. But to run this foundation with a negative net worth doesn't make sense to me. And then we get into some of the fine details. You notice in Schedule D, they've got to tell us. What's this other liability? Okay, who do they owe money to? And so we go down to Schedule D and you'll see, remember that number 871253. Here's Schedule A. Here's Schedule D, okay? And this is where you're supposed to explain what that other liability is. It's further down the page, next page, I think.
There's speculation, Charles, that Schedule D can actually help the immune system.
All right, here we go. Investments, here's other assets, no other assets. Now, here's other liabilities. Due to related entity. So
why is it redacted?
I don't know that that's redacted.
What's
Maybe,
the black?
I don't know. But 871253, due to related entity. This is in 2015. Okay? Now, this related entity is the American Conservative Union.
Why is it black?
I just don't know.
It's unusual, isn't it?
I don't know if it is or isn't. I mean, there might have been an explanation in there that they didn't want out. But
this all looks black too.
Yeah. So the point is, if you wanted, I mean, it's smaller amounts of money than the Clinton Foundation by far. But in 2015, if you go back to the very beginning when we first met, Jason, in 2015 in November, I began pounding the table on the Clinton Foundation in March of 2015. Others had done previously. Peter Schweizer's book came out. There's a lot of noise. By November 2015, the Clinton Foundation is issuing these press releases characterizing legal advice, that the so-and-so of such and such law firm says we don't have a problem, which is not very reliable, but it's useful enough for the mainstream gobsmacked media.
Anytime one lawyer says something, there's at least one other lawyer out there who's going to say the opposite thing.
Well, I've learned in business, and I think in charity land, if you want to get an opinion, a formal opinion from a law firm, first of all, you make sure that the law firm is a substantial law firm, meaning that if they screw up, there'll be heavy prices to pay, and then you force them to put that opinion in writing. You don't say, well, I had a chat with Joe Blow of this law firm, and he said everything's fine. And you write a letter to your, quote, supporters saying that that's what happened. That's, in effect, what the Clinton Foundation did in 2015. And I think the American Conservative Union looked at that and said, the Clinton Foundation is getting away with this kind of crap. We'll do the same thing.
Not to distract from the topic, Charles, but in the world of legal news, one of my former adversaries, who had been representing Devin Nunes, has finally been sanctioned by one of these federal judges. Virginia attorney Stephen Biss ordered to pay $21,000 in legal fees for filing a frivolous lawsuit. For a long time, I called them #fake lawsuits. I guess I just not that familiar with the legal terminology, but there's a little bit of justice going on when we see that such an irresponsible attorney is being held to account. I don't know if any of these other people will be.
Well, let's certainly hope that there is
justice to be had.
Yeah, a very serious inquiry here. So another thing that we'll talk about, I think, on another day, because we're close to 2 hours into this thing, is my suspicion that what they've been doing here at the Clinton Foundation, at many charities, and at the American Conservative Union is they have been running various, quote, initiatives, which are formless. There's no subsidiary called the Social Justice
You
Welfare
just
Initiative.
name it that.
They call it that. It's
Make a web page.
It sounds good. You know, the
a
Grand
club.
Poobah
Yeah.
Exercise in Self-Aggrandizement Initiative. And, you know, and they have the acronym and everything. And because banks are not careful enough and hungry for what are called checkable deposits, non-interest-bearing deposits, they say, okay, if you want to open up an account in this small bank in Arlington, Virginia or somewhere, we'll let you do that. And the next thing you know, then, you have opened the door to massive charity fraud. Because if you can get another bank account with a slightly different name than your real name, then you can ask friends to send money to that bank account, and you can take money out of that bank account, and you can even have the expenses that are withdrawn from the account equal the revenues that are sent in. And then you say, well, there's nothing happened during the year. The revenues were $1 million, the expenses were $1 million. We didn't net any money. Let's just not even talk about it. And it's that type of sloppiness that is either known by the dumbass accountants who were involved in this at the time.
Dumas,
that's right, the French version.
Right.
I should use the French. Either known by them, or they're so Dumas that they're oblivious. They're like, oh yeah, I can get a check for just signing this thing. I'll sign it. Yeah. Give me my check for $16,000. You know.
I just don't think that they're oblivious. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have no misgivings about how many oblivious people there are in the world, but I think there's also a fair distribution of dishonest people in almost every profession, and when you find them, you can kind of put them into these positions. They want to do this stuff.
Yeah, and you think, for example, like Bill Gates's and Melinda Gates's current home that they share together is called, people jokingly refer to it as Xanadu 2.0.
Right.
It's such when they were building that thing and other campus properties, both on the Foundation campus and the Microsoft campus, or when Bill, at one point I think I read that Bill Gates purchased a copy of the Magna Carta, which is kind of cool. There are multiple copies of the Magna Carta floating around, but they're not cheap. And to have your own personal copy of the Magna Carta is kind of, it's
He bought it so he could rip it up, or what?
I don't know. And parenthetically,
Oh, look, he has one of these bounce houses.
yeah, I never had that kind of stuff. But
Well, maybe that's the problem, Charles.
plastic junk, no, I don't like that stuff.
Does he have kids? Like, this
3.
is a weird...
This is probably old picture. But the point here is that when a guy like this wants this house built properly, he makes sure that the house is built properly. When he buys a copy of the Magna Carta, he doesn't say, the thing
It's
comes
probably
back.
the real Magna
Yeah,
Carta.
it's probably, it could be,
Yeah.
He doesn't just like look at something that's an obvious fraud, it's
Yeah.
a crayon.
There's no way they'd charge me $10 million for a fake Magna Carta.
Right.
Who would do that?
I mean, besides, it's in English. And then you say,
Right.
well, Bill, are you aware that back in that time, all legal documents in England
Latin?
were in Latin, not in English?
Well, this is the translation.
Maybe that's why I only had to pay $100,000 for it, So when guys like Bill Gates and people at the very top of the food chain economically, when they want something done correctly, it is done correctly. So the fact that the Gates Foundation paperwork is a shambles,
Right.
and as it concerns the Clinton Foundation, in more than 100 instances going back to 2001, and the 2001 entry has to do with the International AIDS Trust, which is connected to the Clinton Foundation. The fact that there's so many mistakes going back so long tells me that this relationship is a relationship that at the very top, whether Melinda knew about it or not, at the very top, somebody said, with regard to whatever we have to say about Clinton Foundation donations, you don't see that over here. Just don't even ask any questions about it. Like, account, forget it. Just it's right. Trust me. And that must actually have happened. And if you go, I don't know if you remember this, it was particularly annoying to me when I did the first piece on the Clinton Foundation. And Hillary, I got out there before Hillary announced, a month before Hillary, roughly a month, 3 weeks to a month before she formally announced for president in 2015. It was my first piece with so many red flags. Why isn't the IRS auditing the Clinton Foundation? And I think slightly before then, there had been a revelation. And interestingly, now they don't have the number of shares and stuff. Oh, yeah, they have the number of comments is 17,000 comments. You look at this. March 16th, 2015.
So a lot of comments.
My view was, let's get her out of the race so that you have a real contest between somebody like a Bernie Sanders and ultimately it was Donald Trump over the course of America in the future. Let's let the socialists get out there and debate Donald Trump or Jeb Bush, whoever it would have been. We didn't know back in March of 2015. That's a debate the country needs to have, a robust debate. You know, if you want to stand up there and seize all private property, take away the guns, do all this kind of stuff, let's see how popular that is in a robust election contest, was what I wanted. And we didn't get that in 16, we didn't get that in 20. But one thing that's pretty interesting here is that around this time, Hillary got out there and she was late. There was, I think it was Jeff Gerth broke the story, or somebody broke the story about all of Hillary Clinton's emails during her time as Secretary of State were sent out over the private server. And there was a huge hue and cry about that. And so she arrived at the UN, and she got up there and I forget if Melinda was with her or not, but she began the attempt to deflect truth initiative by saying, my husband Bill and I do a lot of work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, trying to equate the piece of crap that the Clinton Foundation is with the much larger, potentially good philanthropy that Bill and Melinda Gates have set up. I mean, there's important distinctions. Hillary and Bill have never earned an honest penny in their lives.
Really, neither has Bill Gates. I mean, that was not honest. If you want to put that qualifier
well, but at least he created a business. I mean, you know.
Right. He stole an idea from somebody and monopolized and.
But I mean, at least it's a business, right?
He's
Bill
an industrious thief.
I mean, it's a monopoly that should be broken up, in my view. But it should have been broken up a long time ago. But
he did something.
There's a big difference between the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah.
Laundry machine, you know, money laundering and political corruption, money for influence, trading game, and the Gates Foundation. At least when you go through the grants, other than the ones to the many Clinton Foundation entities, there are many, many sizable grants to actual charities in the paper. Now, whether they happen or not is another question.
Right.
We can't resolve. But I think we can assume that many of those did indeed happen. And to try to virtue signal and say, our foundation is kind of just like the Gates Foundation. I'm sorry I'm late. I was just at an important meeting with Melinda where we were discussing our joint work, promoting gender equality and all this kind of stuff. And it's bad. So I think where we are in 2021 now, you're back, you're rested, you're well, and
Car's broken.
Good thing it's under warranty.
No, but the warranty doesn't cover other people crashing into it.
That's all right. But the point is, now we have where it could have been a monolith, where Bill and Melinda could have been together and they could have resisted any efforts to get behind what the hell were the Gates family doing with Epstein? What the hell were Epstein and Gates doing with the Clinton Foundation? What the hell are the Clintons doing with the Gates and all? Now, you don't have, I don't think, a monolith. You have competing interests, Bill and Melinda separating and divorcing. You don't do that ordinarily because everything's fine. I mean, you do that because there are profound differences, irreconcilable differences in your lives. And these pressures, alongside the pressures that are operating against Ghislaine Maxwell and people who want to get to the bottom of what happened with Epstein, and people who want to get to the bottom of what really is going on with the Clinton Foundation, and people who want to see tax revenue actually collected to fund all these incredibly expensive schemes that Biden's come up with. These pressures, I think, are now really beginning to get to the boiling point or past the boiling point, and we still don't know what, if anything, John Durham has actually been doing.
I say nothing.
All right, we'll find out. But in closing this Mother's Day special, again, I don't minimize in any way the extreme pain that I think particularly the Gates kids are going through right now. And I don't wish that on them. I'm sorry they're going through it. But on the other hand, if you're going to swan around the world as one of the smartest people on earth, and that would be Bill, and you're going to start saying that some people want to go and have dim sum at a Chinese restaurant, and Bill Gates has decided that the way to cure global warming is to dim the sun. That's actually one of the things he wants to do. This last week, he and a team funded by him has released genetically modified mosquitoes all over the place. What could go wrong with that? And got a lot of wacky ideas, this guy, and it's fine to have those ideas, but I personally am not interested in having a grand wizard run anything. I'd like to see the governments around the world get smaller and smaller and smaller. I like to see people take ownership of their own lives. If I want to read a book written by Bill Gates or a ghostwriter, I'll do that. If I want to go to a seminar and listen to why we should dim the sun or why we should drink water out of a poop transformation machine, I'll choose to do that. But I don't need to be told that that's where my water's going to come from.
I got to tell you something, Charles. As I look at images of these two, I'm struck by the thought that, look, this is going to sound crazy. We know they cloned that sheep, right?
Dolly?
Yes. So the notion of cloning mammals, while it's at once sounds fantastic and like science fiction, it's also basically a medical fact. They can do it.
You're not going to go where I think you're going.
I think this could be the same genetic person, and perhaps Melinda Gates is a genetically manipulated clone of Bill. Look at the nose and the chin.
Well, I thought you were going to go in a different direction. Zero Hedge went in this direction. Can you pull up a picture of Kevin Kline?
Kevin Kline, yes. Kevin Kline is
the actor,
a clone of Melinda Gates.
Somebody, it got tweeted out or something.
Oops, where's the mouse? So I'm Kevin Kline.
Yeah. You could put up and Gates. It's Kline, I think. It's Kline. You've got E-N. Kline. Yeah.
Oh.
And then with Gates. And yeah.
Is this it?
The first one. And if you go down to the comments or down the page, there's a tweet. Yeah, could this split have anything to do with Bill's relationship with Epstein? And then it's further down.
She didn't get the vaccine? Is that true? Oh, that's why they're getting divorced.
Just funny comments. Keep going.
Twitter now is using...
Here you go. Right. You have to admit, though, Kevin Kline is a hell of an actor to stay in character for 27 years, though, and hit that. Oh, boy. It took it down. But there was a tweet of Kevin Kline side by side with Melinda Gates, and it was pretty funny.
Huh. Well, I guess Twitter's artificial intelligence for locating mean tweets is not working perfectly. We didn't really talk too much about today's artwork, Charles, but I can tell...
It's fantastic.
Thank you. I can tell this is a film that you maybe never saw or knew about, but for people who know the movie Real Genius, we've got Bill Gates here as a fake genius. Incidentally, I'm pretty sure that's an Apple computer that he would be leaning on right there, given the time frame. And there's some other...
I love his slippers.
That wasn't mine. That's from the original poster. But real quickly, Charles, a couple things I wanted to share with you. People can now watch our live streams on Rumble. And a lot of people have been having some confusion about Rumble. It does not yet have the ability to save the live stream. So thank you to the 12 people who are watching us here on Rumble. Watch it now and soak it up and enjoy it, because it's going to disappear into the ether after the show is done. And then, Charles, for the first time ever in Crowdsource the Truth history, today's show is also being live streamed on Odyssey.
What is that?
.com. This is somehow confusingly connected to LBRY.TV. So library and Odyssey are somehow the same thing, but somehow not, because you can't get this live streaming. Look, we've got a bit of video feedback happening there. But you can't get this live stream on library. It's only on Odyssey. So people who want to subscribe to Odyssey can watch us there. we've got 6 people watching there. So, this is like planting a seed, which one day will grow into a forest. Right now.
And then we'll sell the carbon credits.
Exactly. Offset the whatever. But of course, people can also watch the live streams on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I'm able to send them in there no matter how many times the different channels get struck. I also wanted to mention, Charles, we've got now the Sunday with Charles YouTube channel. So people can watch our live streams are simulcast over here on the Sunday with Charles YouTube channel. I've also been loading it up with a lot of our classic episodes. So for people who just became aware of Sunday with Charles and haven't been watching since back in 2017, you can go back and you can see what I've been talking about when I tweet at Ben Wittes and ask him why he refuses to look at evidence that indicates that they have been promoting lies from Shane Harris. We talk about some emails that Charles had received from Peter Smith. And actually, this first video was recorded just within days of Peter Smith's death occurring. So you can really go back and kind of follow the timeline as to how we got here. It's often kind of funny and interesting to see what we were talking about, what we were anticipating what might happen, and then comparing that to what actually has happened. Not pretty.
Well, there's a lot out there, and hats off to you, Jason, for producing all this and then curating it and getting all these things operational. And to the subscribers, thanks for joining so quickly.
Yes.
And thanks for. We hope you'll watch and share and tell your friends about this and be patient. I mean, we're not hunting elephants here. We're not even hunting whatever you call groups of elephants, herds, I think, of elephants. We're hunting Tyrannosaurus rex on steroids. These are very big, powerful people, whether politically, economically, or both, and with a lot to lose. And so to change this around, you can't delegate the responsibility for changing this around to me or to Jason or anybody. The way this is going to change is if a large number of people vote these bastards out and start asking the questions when the various governors and mayors and the IRS go to you and say, look, this year for 2021 and 21, you've got to pay a lot more in taxes, and you're making $50,000 a year. You should be saying, no, wait a minute. What about the Clinton Foundation? What about the Gates Foundation? What about Harvard and Yale and these educational and quotes operations that are not, in fact, operated lawfully? Let's get them to pay their taxes first.
That makes a lot of sense to me, rather than raising taxes for everybody else, trying to stamp out the corruption. But that's hitting the bottom line of the people who would be doing that stamping.
But you had that Wayne LaPierre thing you wanted to go.
Yeah. Well, because it was botched. I mean, he's trying to shoot an elephant, and he botched it. Anything botched.
Well, it's funny. Like if you go to that Atlantic page.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to it here.
Yeah, I won't say who it is, but I'm sympathetic, a little bit sympathetic. There are some people who are really into big game hunting, and they're very wealthy, and they go around the world, and they go to remote areas, and they try to bag very dangerous animals. So, for example, it's not lion, of course, and a cheetah and that kind of stuff. Those are beautiful beasts. And dangerous when cornered and stuff like that. But there are even more dangerous animals than that. The name it's not a wildebeest. It's some.
I know what you're talking
water
about.
buffalo.
Oh,
I think it's a water buffalo.
What's dangerous about them?
They move. These things,
but you're standing far away with a gun.
No, these things come really. I think it's water buffalo. I may have that wrong, but a friend of mine was raised on this with his father, and they would go around the world, and they would go to these different places, and they would. Get together with like-minded people and go kill animals of different types. And so they went out to some big-ass place in California, and a number of people were out there with them, and they were bragging. This English guy was there, and of course, some English people like to get excessively drunk. And this guy was bragging about his prowess and how he was going to do this to the animal and bag this animal and do that and whatever. They have a big night. They go off their hunt, and they're in different groups, and they come back, and the owner of the ranch is batshit furious with this English guy because they were supposed to hunt, I don't know, a certain thing, and it said this idiot English guy killed one of the guy's prize calves or something like that. It looked nothing like the animal, but he had been bragging about what he was going to do. He just shoots some cows.
Terrible.
Horrible.
I don't know. I mean, this list here is talking about these animals being dangerous to hunt. I feel
Cape
like
buffalo, that's it right there. Cape buffalo is very dangerous.
But the thing is, I think if you're in a car and if you have a gun, I mean, if Wayne LaPierre wants to try to choke out an elephant, I'll buy tickets to that. Yeah. But the elephant will stomp on his head and kill him in a 5-second bout.
I mean, given where we are, global population 7.5 billion, and the population of these wild animals is shrinking and shrinking, I'm of the camp that says let's
leave them alone.
Hunting, we shouldn't be doing this right now. These are, in some cases, majestic creatures. We should not be killing them. So I'm not in the camp of people who would want to do that. I don't mind target shooting. I'm all on the Barack Obama program. Remember, he said that he's
skeet shooting.
He said one of his favorite things to do is skeet shoot. I've never seen the man picture
totally
shooting
untrue.
skeet. It's like
I think one of his favorite things to do is grift.
Yeah.
And
lecture other people.
Install Marxist regimes, things like this.
Buy more mansions.
Yeah. Tell people what to do, definitely. All right, Charles. Well, with that, thank you for another excellent presentation.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to become a sponsor. We'll see everybody on Wednesday. We'll see what the weather is like, but we'll probably be back walking around. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.